We've roped in Professor Hartmut Winkler, professor in the physics department at the University of Johannesburg, just to weigh in on Eskom's briefing earlier on. Prof, a very good afternoon to you and thank you so much for your time. So Eskom essentially has indicated that we are likely to see more short-term pain for long-term gain. How would you characterize its latest load shedding given its winter plans too?
Yeah, it's not unexpected. I was always very surprised, as were most other commentators, how well Eskom did last year. The fact that we didn't have load shedding for practically a year was almost unthinkable. And in retrospect, I think there was quite an element of luck associated with this as well. But I think what we're currently seeing, and also what we experienced earlier this year, is that the system is still very constrained. There's a lot of units which are broken down, in many cases apparently long-term outages, because Eskom doesn't seem to be able to move too far away from this, what they mentioned, this 13,000 megawatt on unplanned maintenance. That is very high. That's practically a quarter of their generating capacity. And in order for Eskom to run without load shedding, they need to get that down quite considerably. And they're doing reasonably well, despite of what we're experiencing. If a year and a half ago somebody told us we'd be in the situation now where we are largely load shedding free, but every month or two there would be about, we would have been very happy. So ultimately, the whole thing is not unexpected. And until the country gets either fixes its coal plants to something what they were like 10 years ago, which I think may be almost impossible in cases, or until they get more generating capacity, which will also take quite a while, we're still going to be in this constrained situation.
And I mean, notwithstanding last year's successes, of concern is Eskom's energy availability factor 2, which has remained below 60% throughout 2025, in fact. So when you look at its unplanned outages, would you say then the utilities coal fleet is in crisis, or should we just hang tight?
They are certainly in a very difficult situation. Yeah. They could be worse. Because normally, after what we experienced 2 or 3 years ago, which was largely the coal plants failing on a far too regular basis, you don't expect the situation to improve considerably unless you basically put in a new engine. It's like with an old car. Once it starts experiencing problems, it's very difficult to move away from that unless you put in a new engine. Putting in a new engine in terms of coal plants, it's going to be too expensive in practically every instance. So at the moment, they're just trying to do their best to keep these going for as much as possible. But as I mentioned, there seem to be some units which are on really long-term outages. One of them is probably the unit from Medupi, which experienced an explosion about 3 years ago. They tell us that they're hoping that unit will be coming back online soon again, but they haven't sort of specified an exact date. I don't think they can do that. That would certainly improve the situation by almost one stage of load shedding. But that is a sort of long-term outages, which I think is what's the root cause of why we are still in this very tricky situation. I think a lot of units are require very long-term operations. It's not just a case where we have a breakdown and 3 days later the thing will be up and running again. Yeah. Eskom has never been specific about that, and I think that's maybe where they would give us a much better indication of where exactly we are if Eskom can actually tell us how many units are on long-term outages and so on.
And it becomes then very difficult, Prof, don't you think, in light of its winter plan that they announced also several days ago. It becomes difficult in terms of not having that transparency to know what are we likely then to expect over the next few months.
Yeah, well, the minister has been positive, and it's true, they are in a slightly better situation than they were last year. There's just no room for missteps, and we don't know when a misstep is going to happen in the form of an unexpected breakdown. Yeah. The planned maintenance is about to wind down now as we get towards the end of May. So they are going to have much of their fleets available. But the question of whether we're going to get through winter without any load shedding really just depends on how well the power stations behave. If something unexpected happens, and accidents do happen, that's the unfortunate thing, then we are going to have bouts of load shedding. I still expect that this is not going to be the last time we're going to have load shedding this year. I think it's going to, this sort of pattern is likely to continue for the next 2 years or so.
Becomes very difficult. Prof, thank you so much for your time and unpacking that earlier briefing for us. Of course, Professor Hartmut Winkler there, Professor in the Physics Department at the University of Johannesburg.